horror zombies. In a small, quiet town, nestled between dark forests and foggy mountains, the world was changing in ways no one could understand. The once lively streets had fallen silent, with only the rustling of wind and the occasional creak of houses left to echo through the abandoned streets. What was once a close-knit community was now a place of fear, uncertainty, and death. It all began with a strange illness. At first it seemed like a bad flu, the kind that made people cough and feverish. But this sickness didn't go away. It spread quickly, and soon the sick were not just bedridden. They were changing. Their eyes became cloudy, and their skin, once warm, now took on a cold, grayish hue. The more the illness spread, the more horrific the transformation became. At night, the town would hear strange noises, groans and moans from the shadows. It was like a creeping dread that hung over them. Those who had not fallen ill stayed indoors, locking their doors and windows, too afraid to face what was happening outside. The zombies, as they came to be known, wandered the streets aimlessly, driven by some unholy force, their minds consumed by a hunger that could never be satisfied. Lena, a young woman with a fiery spirit and a thirst for adventure, had returned to the town after hearing rumors of what was happening. She'd grown up here but left years ago to pursue her dreams. Now she was back, but not for the reasons she had hoped. Lena had always been curious, and her curiosity now led her into the heart of the disaster. The town was yet eerily quiet when she arrived, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. She made her way to her childhood home, finding it locked and abandoned. As she wandered deeper into the heart of the town, she saw the first signs of the undead, shuffling figures in the distance, their faces frozen in expressions of pain. Her heart raced as she turned to run, but something caught her eye. A shadow darting between the trees, its form too human to be a mere animal. She hesitated, drawn by a strange urge to investigate. As she stepped closer to the woods, she heard the unmistakable sound of a low growl behind her. Turning around, Lena's breath caught in her throat. A group of zombies had surrounded her, their eyes empty and hungry, their mouths dripping with saliva. She could feel the air grow cold, the smell of death hanging heavy around her. There was no escape, but just as she thought her fate was sealed, a loud crack echoed through the woods. The zombies froze, their heads jerking toward the sound, then shuffling away in the opposite direction, as if drawn by something else. Lena didn't question the sudden turn of events. She ran, faster than she ever had before, not stopping until she reached a nearby farmhouse. Inside, she found a small group of survivors, people who had managed to hold out in the farmhouse's stronghold. They explained to her the nature of the disease, how it was not just an illness, but a curse, a plague of the dead that spread like wildfire. They told her of a strange, dark force that had risen from the earth, turning the dead into monsters who craved only death and destruction. The survivors spoke of the origins of the curse. Many believed it had begun in the town's old church, which had been abandoned for years but never forgotten. The priest, a man known for his dark practices, had disappeared shortly before the first signs of the plague began. Some whispered that he had made a pact with an ancient entity, bringing doom upon the land. Others said the ground beneath the town itself had become tainted, stirring something deep within the earth. Lena was skeptical of such theories, but the fear in their eyes was undeniable. As the days passed, Lena joined them in their efforts to gather food and supplies. They ventured into the town only in the daylight, knowing the undead would come out at night, their hunger insatiable. But even during the day, the air was thick with an oppressive gloom, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed to whisper of death. One morning, as Lena ventured into the town to search for medicine, she stumbled across something that sent a chill down her spine. A group of zombies had gathered near the church, not wandering aimlessly, but standing in formation, staring at the old building as if waiting for something. Lena hid behind a wrecked car, her heart pounding in her chest. She watched as the undead shuffled in place, their glowing eyes fixed on the doors of the church. It was then that she realized the curse was not just an affliction. It was a calling. The undead were being drawn to the church, a place that had become the heart of their twisted resurrection. She knew the truth now. The town wasn't just infected. It was being controlled by something far darker, a force that wanted the dead to rise again and again. The survivors were growing desperate. The undead were relentless, and every time they fought back, it seemed as though the dead multiplied. The group had barely enough resources to survive, and tensions were starting to rise among them. But Lena remained determined. She refused to let the town fall without a fight. Then one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a faint sound reached Lena's ears, a soft, melodic chant that seemed to rise from beneath the earth. It was coming from the old church. With her heart pounding, she followed the eerie sound, her instincts telling her that whatever was happening there held the key to ending this nightmare. When Lena reached the church, she found something far more terrifying than she had imagined. The priest, long thought dead, was standing at the altar. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and he was chanting in a language that made her skin crawl. He wasn't alone. Around him, the undead stood motionless, as if awaiting his command. The priest had somehow become the conduit for the curse. Desperation grew among the survivors as they realized that if they were to end this nightmare, they had to confront the priest and destroy the source of the curse. But the task seemed impossible. The undead were more than just mindless creatures now. They were organized, bound by the will of the priest. But Lena wasn't about to give up. She had seen enough death and suffering to know that sometimes fighting the darkness required more than just strength. It required courage and sacrifice. As the survivors tried to regroup, the undead were relentless. They came in the night, their presence felt even before they were seen. The survivors would hide in the farmhouse, barricading themselves in, praying that they would make it through another night. Every day was a struggle, a battle to stay alive. But the fear in Lena's heart grew stronger. The more they fought back, the more the dead seemed to multiply. It was as if they were drawn to the very presence of life itself. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. One night, while scouting the area for food, she stumbled upon an old hidden cemetery behind the town's church. The gravestones were cracked, and the earth was disturbed as if something had recently risen from the ground. It was then that Lena realized the truth. The zombies were not just random victims of a plague. They were the cursed dead, risen to seek vengeance on the living. As the full moon rose, casting an eerie glow on the cemetery, Lena heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. Slowly she turned to see the figures of the undead emerging from the shadows. But they weren't just walking aimlessly anymore. They were organized, moving toward her with purpose, their eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of the wind. In that moment, Lena realized that this was no longer just about survival. It was about fighting back. And in the town where the dead walked, the living had to fight or perish. With newfound determination, Lena rallied the survivors, and they began planning their counterattack. They would not be driven into the darkness. They would reclaim their home from the Silent Walkers, or they would die trying. The town, once a place of peace, was now a battleground, and Lena was ready to face whatever horrors came next. The end